In this video, I want to walk you through automating a document. And this sort of automation happens lots of times in accounting, reporting. So quarterly reports, annual reports, those sorts of things are large portions of those documents are automated. Other things might happen internally or externally, reports that you might want to create, especially reports that repeat over and over. And this simplifies and speeds up the process. There are lots of different software that can be used for automation. We're just going to work with R because the R has a language that creates this automation, and then it also is the software that we'll be doing the data analysis in, so combining them together makes it fairly straightforward. This document I'm going to use in the video is for the GBI mountain biking wholesaler data, and it's just going to be a performance update for the company, and we're just going to look at revenue. I have another section down here to show you in the RMarkdown file how to create a new section, but we'll do everything up here. And we have some text that's describing the report. We have an automated graph. Well, this graph is just one that uses the data that's input into the RMarkdown file and creates a graph the same way we've created graphs up to this point. If this were automated and changed year to year, then we would have a new data set, but then the rest could remain the same. And we have some text here where it's looking at annual revenue, and this decreased is automated, and these annual numbers are automated. So there'll be a lot of little things that we're going to look at that are new in terms of what we've learned so far. It's a really simple report, but the same process happens if you get more complicated reports. So I have two files here. One is the RMarkdown file. That's this one that's open here. And then I also have a regular R script where I have worked on all of the things that I'm going to put into the RMarkdown file. The reason I keep this other R script is because I can look and see the output, practice the code before I put it into the RMarkdown file. It's just easier to work through the code in this setup and then transfer it over to this RMarkdown file. So to open an RMarkdown file, we go here to New File, RMarkdown. If we just click on this, what will happen is it'll create a template, and we can create a new title. It inputs these things into it. We can select HTML, PDF, or Word. These are the ones that it has available automated in terms of documents. We can do the same thing for a presentation. So like you could create a PowerPoint with this material as well. And then there's some other things that are available as other types of outputs also. So let's just do an HTML one. It outputs something, a template that you can then use to go through most of what you need. So it creates the title and tells it what type of document to begin with. Then it has some code here. This is what needs to be in there to initially start up the R material in the RMarkdown. And then you'll notice that anything we do in terms of R coding, like we would have put in an R script before, has to go inside these kind of tilde, they're not quite that, they're, I don't know, these slashes here that, they're the top left of the keyboard. And this is the ending part, and then you start with the beginning, and then you have to have this R and the curly brackets here. And so you'll see down here we have the same thing, R and then something else, but R with the curly brackets and then the beginning and the ending. These give us chunks where we can run R code within that. So it sets it up to show you, here it's putting a table, we've used the summary function before, or here it's putting in a new plot, and then we can put in text here and different ways to format text, so we can bold or we can do italics, other things. And then we have these hashtags that create new sections, so, or number sign or whatever you want to call it. Two of these creates a new section, so you will have this section and we'll have this next section, and you can keep adding new sections like this. Going up a level, we could put 1 in here and that creates a new page, or we put 3 in here, then it puts a new subsection. Alright, so it gives us all this setup. Then all we need to do is start sort of manipulating the setup to get what we want out of it. If we wanted to switch it instead to a Word document, which is what we'll do in the homework, we could just switch to knit to Word here. Notice it changes here. Now it said Word document. It only will do the first thing you have in there, so we could just remove the HTML and it will do this. Or at least it'll only open the first one. Alright, so we have this set up. Now let me go through what we're doing on the document that I've already shown you. So I've changed the title here, I've got the output to a Word document, and then the first thing gives us this R setup. And then there are some options that we can do within this as well. So setup means this is something that's going to start and run R before you do the rest of the document, and these things within this code chunk will be available to the rest of the document. And we have one of the options we can use is, should we include the code? So if include equals false, then the document will also print out these other things here. Okay. So we could do, this is the same sort of thing, like change the options. Is it going to echo and put everything that is in the R code out to the document? So things like that we can put in there or not. I'm just going to remove it. Then we can also do all of the packages that we need. So we need to have all of the packages here in order to use them in the RMarkdown document. I'm going to do the same things that I've done previously. I'm going to read in this Excel file. So notice I have this library that I'm going to use. And I'm going to do a couple of things that I want to be able to use later. So the first is this create an annual total revenue. This is the same type of code we've been doing in the summarizing. So group by year, summarize to get the total revenue. And then I want to create a word that can be used depending on if the last year's revenue has increased or decreased. And let me show you in this practice document here so that you can see how it works. So first I'll run these pieces, and I'll come back to what this code is doing. But the piece that I want you to look at right now is this part here, this increase or decrease. So I created this total revenue and tot, and notice it gives me a total revenue for each year here, and the year of 2010 was higher than 2011, so I need something that tells me that the last year, we're pretending we're in 2012 now, the last year available, the revenues went down, so decreased. So we can do an if-then statement. So here I'm going to do if, and then what comes after if is the conditions to be true, and so they have to go within a set of parentheses. So then all I'm trying to do is say all of this within here, if it's true, then in the curly brackets do this. And then else would be if that's not true, then do this piece. And notice the if true part is all within curly brackets, the else, so if it's not true, is all within curly brackets. And the thing I'm trying to get it to do is create a variable that says that I'm going to call increase decrease, and if total revenues did increase, then I'm going to create the variable as a text increased. If it decreased, then I'm going to create the variable as a text decreased. And I think in the file I had these lowercase. Alright, so what is the condition then that we're trying to look at? Well, I'm going to try and look back at this annual total revenue, and say if this cell here is greater than this cell, then it increased. If this cell is less than this cell, then it's decreased. So it's a little bit complicated, but here what I did is say, okay, so take that column, total revenue from the ANTOTE data set, and I'm going to tell it which cell to look at. And so in the square brackets right here, this is the cell. So this column, this cell. And so what does this do? Well, right here, length, if it's a single dimensional object, so here a column, then it will just give you how many rows are in that column. So notice it says 4. What comes out of that, the length of that column is 4. Well, we look over here, there are 4 rows. So this is going to say find the 4th row of this column. A little bit complicated. Then so if I just run this part, you will see it outputs the total revenues for that last year. Then I'm just going to subtract and do the same thing, except for instead of 4 here, I want it to say 3. So I do the same thing, length minus 1 now, and it outputs 3. And then I compare what comes out of this to 0. So if it's greater than 0, then that's going to be true, and I create this increased variable. If not, then it's going to be decreased. So that I'm going to use that when I look in the text later, but this is, now I have something that gives me total annual revenues, and it has a variable that says increased or decreased, and here it's going to be decreased. Then I'm going to start a new section. So this was all the preparation for the document. Now I'm going to create a new section. I'm going to call that revenue. So 2 number signs and revenue. And you can type whatever you want here to create a title for that section. And notice I'm just typing some things in about it. And then it says GBI's monthly total revenue is portrayed in the following figure. Okay, so this is a new code chunk. And a few things are different, but this should look sort of familiar. A lot of these are things we've already done. There will be a couple new things, but for the most part, this is the same as we've seen before. And echo equals false means don't output the code. Warning equals false, and message equals false means don't output other warnings and things that come when you run the code. So if you put these as true, then you'll see this in the document as well. So you can mess around with that and see what comes out when you create the document. So here I'm creating a new variable, and notice in the data set I have year and month and day. Well, I would like to do a calendar month like March 1st, 2009. That would be something that I would like to see here when I create this data set, because I want to do this graph by calendar month. Well, then I have to have a month that is date that is unique for each month. So we're going to use the LubraDate package. That's this one. So when we're trying to work with dates, it gives us some really great functions, and we may come back and use this at other points. But this LubraDate function allows us to create a new date with this make_date function. And we put in year, month, and then day, and I'm just going to use 1 as the day because I want to summarize up to the month level. So when I run that, let me do it on this one that we can see. If we look over here at the temp data set, you will see I've got 2008 January, the 5th day. And what has happened over here, now it has 2008 January, the 1st day, and it does the same thing for these other days. So what it's then doing is saying every day in a month is going to be assigned the 1st day. What that'll allow us to do is aggregate up to the month level. We would do, I made it 1 to be the beginning of the month. We could do the end of the month, but it's a little trickier, so I just stuck with beginning of the month. The next piece we're going to do is for each month, so group by beginning of the month, sum it up and get the total revenue. Then there's another piece that I would like to do, and that is, as you notice here, we have these spikes that happen. Well, they happen in June, and I know just because I went and looked at it. Well, I wanted to create some guidelines that tell us that this is happening in June, and some words that tell us this is happening in June. None of this is necessary in terms of a graph, but this is to sort of make the graph look nicer. So I'm going to create a list that is from this temp2, or from this, the temp2 data set. And notice the temp2 data set has the total revenues for each month. So I'm going to create a list of months where the beginning of the month is the 6th month. So the lubridate function or package allows us to take the month of a date, and so I'm taking the month of that date. We can do the same thing with the year or day. I'm going to take the month and I'm going to filter so that it's only June of that month. I mean the month of the date is only June. If I look at list, notice it says now I've got only June dates for each of those dates. Well, this allows me then to put in these vertical lines. So the rest here, you'll see I'm going to create this with this data set by month, total revenues. I'm going to draw the line. I'm going to make a dashed line here by using line type. We've seen this before. Now I'm going to put in a vertical line. I'm going to make it in blue, and I'm going to make them cross the x-axis at these points. So remember, I created this data set list, and this column is begin month. I'm going to put in those lines at each of those points. You could put in a single line, which we've done before, but I wanted to create this. Then we can annotate, meaning put in a word or something on the graph. So here I'm going to annotate putting in text. It doesn't have to be text, but that's what we're doing here. And I'm going to put it everywhere that this list has a beginning month, and I'm going to move it 10 to the right, which moves it 10 days over, just so that I can see the word June better. And we're going to put it at the mean of the total revenue from temp2. And the label is going to be June. We're going to rotate the text, and we're going to make it orange. And then finally change the titles. So it's just a lot of work with trying to get the graph to look the way we want. Otherwise, it would be pretty straightforward. And so then I close that out, and this will output now the graph to the RMarkdown file. The last piece, so notice I have the new section here, but the last piece is some text here, and I want to grab and put in numbers in the text. So here I'm going to say annual revenue, and then remember I created this increase decrease object, and it's text, and it says decreased up here. So I created it right, and then it will create it here. Then it will say decreased. So to do that, we create a single of these, whatever below the tilde is, the sort of tick mark maybe that's what it's called. Create this tick mark, and R tells it to run some R code, and then tell it what to do, and I'm going to take the increase decrease variable and output it here. Then back to text from, I'm putting in a $sign here, then the same thing. So notice I'm trying to say annual revenue decreased from a certain dollar to another dollar. So here's 2 again. So from, and then this is the beginning dollar value. So a few tricky things here. So again, I'm taking annual total revenue. I'm going to take double square brackets on each side, just outputs the number of whatever it finds. So I'm going to take annual total revenue. The length tells me the second to last, right? So it takes how many rows there are, subtracts 1. So the second to last row. and it's going to format that number, and it's going to turn off scientific notation, and it's going to put in a mark of a comma to where there are three, right, the 1,000 mark or the million mark. And does the same thing here. So from this number to $this number, it's going to output those into the text as well. So we create all of this. Of course, I'm practicing this over here. So notice I practiced this. And it shows me, oh, there's the number that it's going to output. So I've got it working right. Once I have it all correct, I can save it. And then if you hit knit, what it's going to do is create the output that you've set up in this RMarkdown. I think it's easiest to do this piece by piece and make sure it's working, because if you do all of this stuff and then you have an error, then you got to go back and fix it all. But once you have it, it's called knit. Click on knit, and it's going to run a little bit, and it has to set it up. And by the way, if you use the Word document, you have to have Word on your computer. If you use the PDF, you have to have something called LaTeX on your computer. And if the HTML works for all computers. But then we look and see that the output is what we hoped it would, right? Here's the graph, and then it shows decreased here where we told it to create an automated word, and then it gives us these dollar values also. So it seems like a little bit of work, right? It'd be easier just to type this up manually at first, but when you do this over and over again, or you have things that are very similar with a few small changes in it, then this sort of automation speeds up your task, especially when you have very large documents with lots of things to clean up and to create. All right, so hopefully that you can work through this and kind of start to figure out the basics. On the homework, it's going to be something very similar, and I will show you just how it looks now. And I will give you this document, and I'm asking you to create this document using the bank churner's data and create all of this sort of from scratch, and then you will submit the RMarkdown file that you've used to create this. All right, I hope it's fun. I anticipate needing to help some of you, but please let me know if I can help you.